First item we have on our sheet is the Department Administration memo, page 2, GBA number 2, item 7 it's on page 6, excuse me. Stabilization State Health Insurance Plan Reserve Fund. To consider $10 million from SGF for the State Employee Health Plan Reserve Fund for fiscal year 2023. And as we discussed this yesterday, we were talking about how it would level out the peaks and the valleys, and the budget director Adam Profit is here this morning, and so if anyone has any particular questions, Adam said he'd be more than happy to answer them if you want to come up, Adam. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, we've also got the interim director of the State Employee Health Plan with us who could provide more detailed information, if that'd be okay with the chair.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, there were just some questions as to, why we were adding this and why we were using SGF versus fees.
Sure. So if I can, for the first question, or excuse me, the second question on SGF versus fees, just to infuse cash into the reserve to get it up above that target balance that has been identified by the plan as what a healthy reserve balance could be, get it over the $50 billion mark. And I'm sorry, I forgot the first question already. Off to a good start this morning.
The fees, why we were doing fees rather than SGF, and then I guess we've had a past balance, and we were using this basically to level out premiums as we go forward, so there wouldn't be valleys and spikes in it. And so that was kind of the questions and the information that the committee had asked so far.
Sure. And if it's okay, I think this would be a good time to transition to the interim director of the plan, if that's all right with the chair.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Senator McGinn.
Maybe to add, there's no fees. I mean, we don't have fees that come into it.
Right. So the plan
your premiums.
Yeah, the director will be able to identify that a little bit better.
We're trying to lower the premiums. So,
right.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'm Jennifer Flory. I'm the interim director at the State Employee Health Plan, and we thank you for this opportunity to come and talk to you about the Health Plan Reserve. With a healthy reserve, the Healthcare Commission can reduce, eliminate, or minimize rate increases for the contributions paid by employees and reduce or maintain the members' cost share and benefits under the plan. The State Employee Health Plan is a self-funded health insurance program, so the state maintains the responsibility for paying all the covered claims and expenses covered by the plan and its members. The target reserve for the balance of the reserve fund is $50 million. The average ending reserve balance since 2016 is just over $43 million. The average balance is only this high as there was a reduction in claims expenses during the last 2 years of COVID. The claims expenses have now increased and are back to their normal level. We want to be clear that the current balance of the reserve fund is adequate. The GBA is an opportunity to provide an investment for benefits to state employees without creating a long-term obligation for the employer. And as Senator McGinn stated, we don't receive fees. The employer makes a contribution towards the cost of the health insurance, as do employees, and that's how we receive the funding for the plan. We'd also like to address a few questions that you had last week when you discussed the GBA. In 2019, Senate Bill 572 created a requirement that the State Employee Health Plan hire an auditor to audit the vendors who administer the State Employee Health Plan programs. The initial estimates indicated that the state could recover up to $9 million from vendors. $9 million was taken from the state's reserve funds in 2019. The state was not able to recover more than a negligible amount from the audits of the vendors. And we did provide a copy of Senate Bill 572 in the packet that was provided to you all. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services performed an audit that penalized the state for depositing interest earned on the state employee health plan reserve into the state's general fund. The federal government forbids the practice of because certain employees are federally funded under the program. HHS leveled a penalty of $17 million, which was paid in installments from 2014 through 2019 from the State Employee Health Plan Reserve account. This reserve fund payments were never made whole. The State Employee Health Plan Reserve Fund was never made whole after making the payments to HHS for the penalty. If you have additional questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those at this time.
Senator Saltram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When was the last time we did a comprehensive analysis of the plan deductible, covered benefits, the co-pays, and such, comparing them to what's available out there in the private market? When's the last time that's really been done?
The State Employee Health Plan looks at the health plan benefits each year. Last year, we had our Siegel Consulting Group do a comparison with other states as well as with private industry that was presented to the Healthcare Commission as they made decisions about the plan.
So it's an ongoing process. You will do a review annually?
We review that annually.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So was it 2009 then when the $9 million was taken from the reserve account?
Yes.
And so $9 million were taken in 2009, but the recoup was minimal.
Right.
So in fact, we actually depleted in 2009, the state depleted that reserve account, and that never was replaced.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the adoption of GBA number 2. It is item 7 on page 6. The motion is to add the $10 million from SGF to the State Employee Health Plan Reserve Fund for FY 2023.
Have a motion, second by Senator McGinn. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, the motion carries. Next item we have is Department Administration, GBA number 2, item 8, page 6, the Kansas Residential Tax Rebate consideration. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to not adopt GBA number 2, item 8 on page 6, the Kansas Resident Tax Rebate.
Have a motion, second by Senator Fagg. Any questions or discussion? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm obviously not going to vote for this. I won't make a substitute motion. I figure the vote will show what we want to do. But I think we've certainly over the last several years, and particularly this year, we have provided tax assistance to a lot of businesses and higher income earners. I think this is certainly a way for us to get money to our ordinary citizens and help them out. Inflation is certainly on the rise, and we've had a lot of discussion here, and I certainly would like to see this stay in there, particularly for the purpose of having conference and seeing where we might be as we hash out the full budget with the House. So I'll be voting against this motion.
Any other discussion? Senator Petty.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. Are we on the Human Services Consensus caseload? Which one are we on?
We're on the second one on your base sheet.
I know, I'm looking at that.
It's Department Administration number 2.
Oh, the tax rebate?
Correct.
Okay, I wasn't quite understanding what was said. I would agree. I think it's...
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. You sure can. Okay, next item we have is the Kansas Public Employee Retirement System Committee. I'm going to make a suggestion on this one that we do not do anything today, that we're going to wait until a little later before we look at this. We want to see what the Capers Board is going to do with the assumed rate of return. So we'll just skip over that one. Next item we have is Kansas Bureau of Investigation, the Science Laboratory at Washburn University. We got information yesterday to consider paying off this bond. The SGAF payment is $4.3 million per year. Paying this off early would save us approximately $10 million, and this bond is at 5%. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we pay the 41.2 million plus interest to retire the bonds on the Forensic Science Laboratory at Washburn University.
I have a motion, a second by Senator Fagg. Any questions or discussion on this? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As much as I would like to do this, I personally have some other, and would hope the group might have some other priorities. Particularly, we just nixed the $250 income tax rebate. We also have a food sales tax that we want to cut, at least all. I would like to cut all of it, but at least in part, and that's there for consideration. So I certainly would like to pass over this and wait and see what happens on those other things before we make a commitment that might cause us to not do something that would be certainly a higher priority. So I'll be voting no on this, not because I don't think it's a good idea, but because I think there's some other priorities.
Other questions, discussion? Senator Petty.
I have to agree with Senator Hawk. I think our Kansas citizens need to feel the benefit of our strong Indy balance, and I would like to see some things happen first, particularly the access sales food tax before we pay off any more bonds.
Any other questions or discussion? Senator Hawk.
Just a procedural question, Mr. Chairman, is if we passed over this and waited later in the week to see where we are in conference committee and what happens with some of those other tax bills, is that possible, or do you feel like we need to make a decision on this one today?
I think we just want to move forward.
Okay. Well, that makes it easier for me to vote no. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? You want to be recorded?
Yes, please.
Motion carries. Record Senator Hawk, Senator Petty as no's. Thank you. Senator Clays. Wait a minute. We're moving on to the education. There's 3 items. The GBA 2, page 10, which is the 11.1 million for the Capers edition, the Department of Education budget. Okay. Excuse me, I missed one. I thought I was off here, so. We're still on the KBI, and it's Senate Bill 366, the Kansas Offender Registration, and we need to consider adding 57,371 SGF for 1 administrative officer for an FTE position. Were there questions on this? Everybody's okay with this one? Senator Hawk.
Is that in 22 budget? 23? It seems like a low amount, so I wonder if it's, by the time you figure benefits, et cetera, I wonder if it's just partial year.
Amy, do you know if that's for 22 or 23? I mean, okay.
I'm in favor of
Senator,
whatever it
and
is,
this
but
was just adopted yesterday.
Yeah, this just was adopted yesterday, so it is 23.
thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, Senator Clays?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify that this was passed yesterday on the Senate floor and has not been signed into law, but we would anticipate that happening. So I move that we add 57,371 SGF and 1 administrative officer FTE to the Kansas Bureau of Investigation for the Kansas Offender Registration.
Motion, second by Senator Fagg. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Now we'll move on to the education. There's three education items here. There's the 11.1 million for capers that was short because of ARPA or bonus pay. And then we had the education budget, and we have the special education of $30 million. And I recognize Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we move to the Mega Education Bill HB 2567, the GBA number 2, item 10 on page 7, GBA 2, item 11 on page 7, and the Kansas State Department of Education budget for FY 22, 23, and 24.
I have a motion, second by Senator Fagg. Discussion? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From our previous discussion, I see why we're doing that, and I'll just make one more pitch that I think ultimately, depending on what happens, we may have to do the education budget in here. But because we heard yesterday that the capers part of this was not state foundation aid, we took that out of the short item description. Seems to me with our other action on capers that we would be wise to go ahead and get that funded. And if we're going to leave those other two items, I could see our rationale being in there, but it would make more sense to me to put the capers part in there. And I know that I'll probably be in the minority, but if the group was amenable to that, I would do a substitute motion and pull that out if you think that might pass.
I think that the motion is made the way it.
Okay, I had a feeling that was the case. Just wanted to give the group an option to do something better.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't slow us down.
Any other questions or discussion? Senator Petty.
I'm just going to voice the same concerns that I've voiced for the last 3 meetings, sorry, about adding anything more into a K-12 budget hearing that is driven by the House and that is not following the position of the Senate, although I guess now we're kind of making that it is the position of the Senate. Particularly this item dealing with the capers, as the Senator Hawk said, I don't see any reason why we'd even be putting that there. We have an obligation at Ways and Means to follow through. We had these subcommittees. We had the Education Committee handle that education budget. They voted it out. It came to us, and we've now relegated our position to a House position. So I don't really understand why we want to add anything more to a list of items that we haven't dealt with anyway. So I'm not supportive of this, particularly the one dealing with capers, but all of it, we can deal with it here.
Thank you, and I would add that the committee would be supporting all three of these positions as far as funding the special ed and the budget and the keeper item. So, I mean, we are supporting these, but the way we've decided to do this is we're working through the mega bill, so. Senator Hawk.
Yes, could we add that as we pass those on to the joint education Budget Committee that we are supportive of those items. Could we
Right.
add that as a friendly amendment?
That's what I just was
Yeah,
saying.
I
that
mean, could
we
that
are
be-
supportive of it, and
that
I
would
guess
be-
if we need, do you think
that
we
would
need to
be-
add it, Amy, or to just say that we support it? I mean, it's, okay.
That's added in there. I can certainly vote yes.
Senator Clays, are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned yesterday, I think it's important that these items be considered fully and that they are important. So yes, I'm okay with that.
And supported.
And your,
If you needed the words, yes, I support them. Thank you.
Thank you.
and second by Senator Frag, amended? Okay. Any other questions? Senator Alley?
Could you clarify what you just said?
Senator Clays?
Are you asking for a clarification on the motion? Okay. The motion is to move the GBA number 2, item 10, page 7, and GBA 2, item 11, page 7, to, let me get the bill right, to the mega education bill, HB 2567, as well as the House and Senate Committee, Kansas State Department of Education budget for 22, 23, and 24 into HB 2567, the mega education bill, with notation of the committee's support of these provisions.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item we have is the Legislature KLIS modernization project, considering 5.1 million SGF and 6 FTEs for the modernization of KLIS, the computer programs. And I think we had information on that. Was there any additional questions on that? Everybody satisfied with the company we're using and so forth? Senator Hawk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say I appreciated getting that report. One of my concerns was that's a fairly large amount of money, but when we got the report about how much had been spent on the previous, it seemed very reasonable, and so I'll be voting yes on that.
No other questions? Senator Clays?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the addition of 5.1 million SGF and 6 FTE positions for the KLISS modernization project for the legislature.
We have a motion. We have a second. Second by Senator Hawk. Any other questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Next item we have is the Larner State Hospital, GBA number 2, item 5, page 4, on the contract nursing staffing at the Larner State Hospital, considering adoption of a GBA for 5.5 million SGF for contract nursing staff. Was there any other questions on this particular item? Senator Alley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This 5.1 is for 23, or excuse me, whatever number it was. Is it for 23 or 22?
22. It's to
We
get
have
through, it's to get through the year.
Do we have a plan for 23?
Well, yesterday we asked, because the continuation of contract nurses or docs or any of these type services, whether it's in the rest homes or where it's at, we're relying a lot on these traveling folks in many of our different areas. And you're right, we need to try to figure out how we're going to get permanent staff and retain folks.
The concern I've had, and I've had it, and it's not just this hospital, it's several of them, and that is we're using the unfilled positions that have been budgeted to pay for this, and now we want to put more money on top of that just to get through 22. So 23, we have no plan for 23 if we continue using these traveling nurses.
It's going to be dire because, when the federal funds quit coming and we're unable to, to use them, it's going to be quite a drain on our SGF. You're exactly right.
I'd like the agency to come up with a plan and tell us what their plan is.
Is there anyone here that could speak to this item?
Mr. Chairman, Scott Bruner, I'm the Deputy Secretary for Hospitals and Facilities at KDADS. I think Senator Alley makes a really good point. It's an issue we've been looking at as well of how to staff the hospital adequately, keep the bed capacity at the level it needs to serve Kansans and all the communities that we serve. But we can't afford the rates that we're being charged going forward, certainly not through all the way through fiscal 2023. A couple of things that are moving that would need to be part of the plan that we'll show you. Number one, we're paying a COVID rate now to these to the staffing agencies. We're working with the Department of Administration and the statewide contracts that we use to negotiate that rate down, or at least put a trigger date on it when that can go away and we go back to the base rate, which is high, but not $150 an hour high. So that would help us into 2023. We're also looking at the 24/7 pay plan and using that as a part of the recruiting effort now that we know that's going to continue through fiscal year 2023. It's still temporary, but it's a longer duration, so we can use that as part of our recruiting efforts. We'll look at, again, our budget revisions for the fall as well, see where we are, and hopefully close some of the gap on our own. But I think renegotiating the contracts will help quite a bit. And then looking at the impact of the 24/7 pay plan and our recruiting efforts will be part of that scenario as well.
Senator Alley.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. Do you have an idea when the COVID additional funding will go away? When we can say we're not paying you under COVID anymore, we're paying you on regular traveling nurses pay?
What we were attempting to do, again, working with the Department of Administration, was to amend or have the contractors agree to an amendment that would say the COVID rates would only be applied if the agency nurse or agency staff member was working in a unit where there was a COVID positive patient, which would limit where they were. It wouldn't limit where they work, but limit where those fees would apply. We got some pushback from the vendors about that, and we're worried about losing some percentage of the people that we need to keep the place running. So we pulled that amendment back, but we're going to go back to that same kind of trigger, and that seems like a reasonable threshold to say if you're working around a COVID patient, that's when you'd get that additional COVID rate. And right now at the campuses, Larned's got 3 units with COVID positive patients on it out of the 7. So it would still limit where that impact would happen.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate the information. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the addition of GBA number 2, item 5 on page 4, the $5.5 million in SGF for the contract nursing staff at Larned State Hospital.
We have a motion. We have a second by Senator McGinn. I have a question, I guess. Amy, is this something we could use ARPA dollars for, or does it have to be SGF? I might ask the committee to consider that we adjust the motion, just say that if we will do this, and if ARPA money is available, we could go ahead and use that instead.
Okay, allow for a restatement of the motion. I motion the adoption of GBA number 2, item 5, page 4 for contracted nursing staff at Larned State Hospital, with the adjustment that the $5.5 million first be reviewed for ARPA eligibility and funding. If not, then SGF for the contracted nursing staff.
Second by Senator McGinn. Everyone okay with that? Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item we have is Kansas Department for Aging and Disability Services. Additional language to make the $15 million allocated for mental health bed expansion contingent on State Finance Council approval. Considering language to make $15 million for regional mental health beds expansion in approval in Sedgwick County. So I guess we had a lot of discussion with this yesterday with our senators, in particular, the three from Sedgwick County where this is located.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McGinn.
I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I talked about the LBC yesterday, but I want to just give another example of process that we could do. First off, we would put the money in and not to be released until there is a finalized plan that has gone through a committee and then ultimately approved by the State Finance Council. And what this committee, we would have however many committee days, I wouldn't think you'd need a lot, 3 or 4 interim days. And it could consist of Legislative Budget Committee and 2 chairs off of the Mental Health Modernization Committee. And then, and you could add 1 or 2 more. Just depends on whether you want 9 or 11 or just how you want to make that adjustment, okay? So that's just to help visualize that. And then if we would have committee meetings and bring in the Sedgwick County folks, it may not even be, could be 2 or 3 meetings for that matter, but bring them in and make them present a plan as a united body. I think that's what we're dealing with. We're hearing bits and pieces of the puzzle and we're not getting it put together. And some of their partners, such as Via Christi Ascension and others that are involved in this whole thing. And then once there is a plan that is devised by a united front, then we would move forward.
Okay, Senator McGinn, question. Would you consider getting the details and writing that drafted?
Yes,
And
I'll get that done.
And maybe we could get that ready for either if we meet later today or.
We weren't going to wrap up today at 10,
No,
right?
no,
Is that
no,
correct?
we're not
Okay,
going to get
I will
done.
get something drafted for you.
Okay, I was going to say, and if not, we could put it in conference, so whatever you were comfortable with.
And I think the House, according to Senator Solontrop, they're working on something as well. So if we
Okay.
had a position and they maybe will come up with a solution.
Okay, so committee, if everyone's okay, we'll wait for something to be drafted by Senator McGinn, and then we'll address this later today. Okay, the next item we have is the Kansas Department of Aging Disability Services funding for the 988 number. And I think committee, we don't need to do any funding at this time, but I think we just need to authorize a fund so whenever everything is in place, that where the money can go. Is that right, Amy? Yes, so what we're doing is creating the fund, so when the bill passes, then there's a place for the funding to go to. Everyone okay with that? Senator Hawk?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with that. I just want to be clear, if there's some bump in the road, which we get, I think it really will take $10 million from the modernization mental health committee that we had this summer and fall. And I'd want to make sure as we go through conference committee that if for some reason that doesn't get passed, that we have adequate funding so we can do what we're required to do with that and provide the help and support we need to make an impact on this issue.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that's why we want to make sure that we have a place for the funding to go when the bill passes, and then you'll be on that conference committee, so.
And I am optimistic that the bill will pass. It's just I've been around here too long where I've seen some things fall through the cracks as we come down to the end.
Senator Petty.
Don't we already have a 988 operational fund? It was established in 21 with the $3 million.
It is special revenue versus SGF. So if there's any additional questions, Matt's here, we can have him come up if you have anything else.
SGF going into a special revenue fund? I mean, it's SGF, but it's going into a special revenue fund, so that's what you have to establish the special.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so last year when you appropriated funds for 988 operations, that was SGF going into their operating, just their operating account in KDADS. So this would be establishing a special revenue fund, which would then receive a transfer directly from the SGF into the special revenue fund. So currently as it is, there's just a $3 million allocation in their operating account for 988. This would establish a separate SGF account that would then receive a transfer to sort of fund that account that the agency can then spend from.
Senator Petty.
If we, as this moves along, if we establish this special revenue fund, is that ongoing or does that have to be then funded annually?
So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my understanding is, so the bill, Senate Bill 19, would establish a demand transfer that occurs every year. Were you to do it outside of the bill and the appropriations, that would just be for the year that the appropriations bill covers. But if that bill were to pass, Senate Bill 19, that is an ongoing demand transfer into this special revenue fund.
So Matt, as long as we have the special revenue fund, and the bill passes, then it's just taken care of, correct? Any other questions? Senator Hawk.
Just to be clear that if we pass this, then, and we're in conference committee, and if my worst case scenario comes about, we have the authority in conference committee to try and solve this problem then by appropriating this language. Is that correct?
Right.
Good, thank you.
No other questions for Matt? Thanks, Matt. Any other questions, committee? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee authorize the appropriation of the 988 Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Crisis Hotline Fund.
Second by Senator Fagg. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You want to be recorded, Senator Solon-Trump? Please record Senator Solon-Trump as a no.
Mr. Chairman, may I explain my vote?
You sure can, Senator Solon-Trump.
Again, I'll reiterate. It's because of the mechanics of this issue. We have a disjointed 911 system in this state with over 150 locations. We're minus personnel. They're not professional. In many, many cases, they're part-time, and this endeavor is just going to grow into a similar situation as we got there. This all needs to be restructured, rethought through, and put some sort of a professional system behind this. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for your explanation. Next item we have is the Board of Regents. We discussed this numerous times when we passed the budget earlier. And with that, I recognize Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we maintain the Senate position of deletion of the $20.7 million from SGF for the post-secondary education operating grant.
We have a motion. We have a second by Senator Fagg. Any other questions? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to make a substitute motion that we add the $20.7 million in, and we'll give some explanation if I get a second.
Second by Senator Petty. Please explain.
As we discussed yesterday, and we looked at that list of items that Shirley presented to us, and it is true, we have added a lot of money appropriately into post-secondary education, but this is for operational money, and I think it's certainly many of us's intention is to try and hold tuition flat. And if I remember right, in our mega bill, in terms of higher education, we had a provision there that asked them not to raise tuition. So if we don't add this money, I don't think it's reasonable that we handcuff the Regents and the post-secondary institutions with not being able to raise tuition. So I'd just like to put the money in here, have that expectation that we not raise tuition, help our families and our higher ed students to be able to afford college education, which is good for our economy and for our jobs in the state. So I would hope we might pass this, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of Senator Hawk's substitute motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Motion fails. Okay, Senator Hawk would like to be recorded, and Senator Petty would like to be recorded, correct? Both, okay. Senator Hawk.
Could I add, and I'm not sure what the appropriate way to do that is, if it would be a separate motion or if it would be added to Senator Clays's motion, that we not hold the higher ed institutions to no tuition. Maybe I need to ask staff if I'm correct, if that's in the original bill that we passed in the mega budget.
Committee, there is language in the bill that we passed earlier that does freeze the tuition. If the committee chooses to adjust that, so part of the problem is, I know at some of the smaller universities in particular, it would be pretty hard for them to hold the line. And I don't know if we didn't fully fund it, and I think that was part of the idea, was if it was 100% funded, that they would agree not to raise tuition. And I know we did this a couple of years ago, and even though we did it, there were some raised their tuition, so I don't know that, whatever the committee would think, but Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Point of clarification, this deletion of 20.7 is not from what they received last year, but is it not from the 45.7 that we just approved to help them with this situation? I think that right now they need to consider living within their means with this 25 million that's already in there. So I will be voting no for that portion of that.
Shirley, I got a question. Okay, I think what we're going to do first, we're going to go ahead and finish voting on the motion that Senator Clay's made to remove the money, and then we will take a motion on what we want to do with the language. So on the continuing to hold the Senate position, any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. You want to be recorded, Senator Hawk and Senator Petty? Senator Petty does not, just Senator Hawk. Okay. So now, if Senator Hawk, if you'd like to make a motion on the language part of that for the holding the tuition freeze.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And listening to our discussion, I would like to make a motion that we remove the freeze on tuition, but that we encourage the Regents institutions not to raise tuition if possible. But we don't handcuff them with that. So I make that motion.
I have a motion, a second by Senator Petty. Any other questions or discussion on the language? Senator Hawk.
I do have, and I know one of the things I think all of us are pleased with is we put some money in for special projects, but not all of some of the Regents institutions have greater needs than others. So some of them may not receive any of the money, particularly for the demolition or some of the deferred maintenance kinds of things potentially. So I think this is a good way to affirm how important we think the Regents institutions are and higher education is to our workforce development, but still giving them the flexibility to do what they need to do to keep high quality programs.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion fails. Division's called. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed? Motion fails. You sure can. Senator Petty also would like to be recorded. Okay, next item we have is the Department of Commerce. This is Senate Bill 347, the Apex Economic Development Package. This is clarifying whether to appropriate the funds. And I think all we really need to do here is the same thing we did earlier, establish, a fund so when and if something happens, there's a place for the money to go. Correct, Amy? Okay. So, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move appropriation of the fund for the Attracting Powerful Economic Expansion Act, SB 347.
I have a second by Senator Fagg. Questions? Senator Solentrum.
Just a real clarification, establishing the funds or fund accounts?
Establishing the fund. We're authorizing the fund, yes.
Everyone okay with that? Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item we have is the Kansas Department of Transportation, Senate Bill 313. Consider adding $18,120 from the State Highway Fund for the Memorial Highways Bridges. Here again, do we just need to have a fund, Amy? Or do we have to put the money? So these are donations. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the committee appropriate from the State Highway Fund for Memorial Highways and Bridges, Senate Bill 313, which is in conference, $31,520.
A motion, second by Senator Fagg. Committee, this is a fund that's already set up. When the donations come in for these signages, it goes into this fund. So we're authorizing the money to come out of that fund for the signage.
So
Senator
the
McGinn.
state does not pay.
Right, yes, that's why I wanted to clarify. It's a fund where the donations go, so. Any other? Senator Hawk.
Just clarification, did HB 2478 pass both bodies, and isn't it on the way? Do we need to reference that bill also in addition to 313?
Yeah, 2478 did pass, and that's why we changed that from 18 to 31.
I'm just saying the motion only mentioned 313. Do we have to mention the other bill that passed, or does it make any difference?
No, we don't need to.
Good.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Going down the list here. Right. I think what we'll start with, several committee members had a couple of requests, and I'm going to start with Senator Kirshen. He had a proposal for us for the $350,000 for a needs assessment. Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we did pass out a explainer yesterday, I believe it was. You'll have those, but that's what's on the back side of that page, position number 3, there were 3 requests, and we decided to prioritize and ask for the $350,000 for the needs assessment to build a new dairy facility there at some location. But that's basically what it is.
Any questions on Senator Solentrum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am supportive of this, but I am curious, what kind of activity do we have in that area? we have substantial numbers of dairies moving in or will be moving in?
We will be, right now, there's 228 active producers in the whole state. And there's probably 10% of those produce most of that milk. But the dairies that are coming in, that Hilmer Cheese is coming in the middle of the state by the county is Dodge City. And then they're planning on building their cheese facility there. And with them will come, they need another 100,000 cows to supply the demand they have for running through that plant. And so we're in a situation where our university facility is antiquated, and where do we go from here to make that work to tie in with this kind of production for everybody? I'm just glad, like I said yesterday, it was called a needs assessment. It's not a study just to look at stuff and jumble numbers around, but what the effect is and where it's going to go and what's going to happen 10 years down the road. What research and extension are we going to get out of the facility to help the dairy industry? And I mentioned that largest dairy cooperative in the United States has now got their headquarters in Kansas. We have the Hillmore operation. It's as close to the apex as you can get, $800 million. So we're actually being proactive. Let's get moving on this and get the investment started. So that's all we're doing. And just for the number 3 is the only one we're asking requests for.
Any other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you. And so, Senator Kirshen, I noticed that it says that there's a projected 60% growth by the end of this decade. Is that based on that cheese company coming in, or you mentioned about the higher demand for cattle, for number of cows? So what's that 60%?
That would be the result of the additional cattle coming in to supply that plant.
Thank you.
There's 175,000 head out there now. Probably need another close to 100,000 at peak.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Senator Kirshen, if you'd like to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we adopt a $350,000 for the dairy, what's it called?
Needs assessment.
Needs assessment. So
We have a motion, second by Senator Clays. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, the motion carries. Next, we'll have Senator McGinn had a proposal for the Envision 500,000. Senator McGinn.
Thank you. This is a one-time $500,000 for Envision to renovate the facility for people with developmental disabilities, but also who have become blind. There is a state's final rule that is going in place September 23rd, and if they are not able to do this renovation, then they will close the door to these individuals. The program is called Pride, and it's a day support program that teaches them how to live on their own in a house. So part of this is remodeling an apartment that teaches them how to get around if they are blind, but also it also teaches them job skills so that they can also work out in the community. So it's estimated to be more than that, but they're going to find private funds to fill the gap.
Any questions for Senator McGinn? Seeing none, Senator McGinn, if you'd like to make your motion.
I'll make a motion to approve $500,000 for the Pride program for the Envision facility in Wichita, Kansas.
I have a motion, second by Senator Clays. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
The background.
Okay. Next, we'll have Senator Petty has a proposal on Senate Bill 399. Senator Petty.
Thank you. I think there might be a blue sheet available to go out. Senate Bill 399 was passed by the Senate 40-0. You may have received an email just last night or today, and it allows the maternity centers to access insurance from the Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act. There's no fiscal note attached to this. This did, as I said, pass the Senate 40-0, and it did pass out of the House Committee, Insurance and Pension Committee, but then it did not go for a final vote on the House floor. So that's why I'm bringing it forward.
Any questions for Senator Petty? Senator McGinn.
I'm just trying to understand, how did it come about and why are we doing it? And
Senator Petty.
get a little more background.
Sure. So it came about that they actually had gone before the Bob Bethel Oversight Committee, and that a professional facility malpractice coverage is required by CanCare and commercial healthcare insurance companies in order to serve its members. Right now, the maternity centers are not they are not part of the Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act. And so this would make them available for that to be there. They also would have to have all of their other licensing and approval before they, would go for it to get the insurance. One of our facilities, and actually in my community, closed, and partially it was due to the lack of availability of the insurance. And so it's not going to help this one to reopen, but it will help the others to stay open.
Senator McGinn.
So it's a proviso, so you still have to try to get a bill passed next year?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So it's just a temporary fix.
It is.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, Senator Petty, if you'd like to make your motion.
I move that we add the contents of Senate Bill 399 to include maternity centers in the definition of a healthcare provider in the Healthcare Provider Insurance Availability Act.
I have a motion
In FY
by
2020.
Senator Petty and a second by Senator Clays. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. See, we've got a little time left here. Senator Clays, we discussed briefly yesterday about the folks that were left out on the pay raises for the state fire marshal and bids. And so at this time, we will discuss the fire marshal and bids. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and representatives from both agencies are here today so that they can answer any questions that you might have, but I'll start out by making the motion to include the fire marshal and bids in the 5% pay raise.
I have a motion, second by Senator Fagg. Are there questions for staff? Senator Solentrum?
Do we have a rough fiscal note?
Does someone out there know? Please come forward.
Thank you, Chair and Committee.
Please state your name.
Sorry,
People
Doug Jorgensen, State Fire Marshal. For us, we're completely fee-funded, so there's no SGF money involved, and we will find the funds in our existing accounts.
Any other questions? See none, thank you. And if bids could come forward also, please.
Hi, I'm Heather Sussna with the State Board of Indigent Defense Services. Thank you very much for having us here today. As far as the fiscal impact of the 5% raise, I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. We would be able to probably get that to you by the end of the day, I think.
Do you have any kind of guesstimate?
Since we had been left out of it, we hadn't calculated that out originally. We did, as part of the pay scale adjustment, add $3.9 million on top of our current budget, so I'd have to calculate that out.
Okay. And you think you could get that for us?
I can get that probably within an hour after I get back to my office.
Okay, so maybe we'll wait on bids till after lunch.
Yeah.
Or Senator Saltram, are you okay with it then? Okay. I think we'll just, any other questions for Heather? Senator Petty?
Would you, with the 5% pay increase that's going to be occurring or is in the budget already, would this then again put you under market if you're not included?
If we did not get the 5% pay raise on top of our original market adjustment, I think it would put us behind, and that's because our pay scale adjustment that we created for this fiscal budget was based on figures that we had collected from comparable district attorney and prosecutors' offices across the state from 2020. So their pay scales were already a little bit behind, since we've made this request 2 years in a row now for our pay scale adjustment. So then to lose out on the additional 5% raise that the rest of the state employees are getting, that would put us behind.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Heather? Seeing none, thank you. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Let's see. Senator Petty.
I'm sorry to ask this, but in the end, what we just voted on, was that both, or was it?
Bids and the fire marshal.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Saltrop, the best early quick estimate on the bids was a little over $700,000. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had some economic development projects that were granted to Kansas State University, the University of Kansas, and Wichita State University. I have a motion to include economic development projects for Emporia State, Pittsburgh State, Fort Hays State, and Washburn University. For Emporia State, it would be the nursing program relocation and staffing. For Pittsburgh State, the expansion of the Tyler Research and Development Park. For the National Institute for Materials Advancement Manufacturing prove-out facility. For Fort Hays, the Gross Coliseum improvements, and for Washburn, the Center for Integrated Health Studies. The total amount will be $24 million for the 4 universities at and requiring a match for the remaining funds. I can do some quick math on the entirety of that, but it will take me a minute. But we would be appropriating $24 million in this motion.
$6 million.
With a $6 million match.
No, it's
So
$6
$6 million for each, right? Yeah, six times 4, 24. There you go.
I have a motion, I have a second. Senator Hawk seconds.
No.
Oh,
No.
Senator Fag this. Okay, now we'll do questions. Senator Hawk.
Thank you. This is in addition to the allocations that we made earlier in the budget, in the mega budget. That's not part of,
Pardon me?
this is additional $24 million.
Yes.
added to the budget.
The big 3 got all the grant money, and these 4 didn't. There wasn't any left, so this is in addition to what we did for K-State.
Is this Spark money?
Wichita. Yes, we're using Spark
This
money.
is Spark money.
ARPA money.
ARPA money.
Yeah. ARPA.
And I think those, I'm trying to remember if that was 1-to-1 match or if that was 2-to-1 match.
It was 1-to-1, but some of these are going to be a little bit offset because of their projects. Some are going to be more and some are going to be just a little less.
But Generally, they're 1-to-1.
Yeah. Do we need to make sure in the motion that we had ARPA funds or just as long as you know? Okay.
ARPA funds.
ARPA funds, okay. Any other questions? Senator Petty?
I'm sorry, but had we discussed these prior? I don't recall, or was this was this a House position?
No, it was, we'd set some funds aside and remember use Wichita State, for instance, the NIAR project, for their construction, and K-State had one, and then KU had one, and it was a grant. And by the time them three got done, that was all the money we had allocated. And the other four also had proposals, and we had already spent all the money. So we're just adding additional funding here. And then when we're done with this one, we'll look at the community colleges, because the same thing happened there. We put a block of money, and by the time all the requests come in, there wasn't enough funding.
So I'm a little more familiar with the community college one, but for the universities, were these proposals that actually had been brought forward?
Right, they had brought them forward to Regents.
To the Regents? So when we're talking about this 24 million, it's for those
These four universities projects.
specific projects?
Right.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I think we'll go ahead and start on we got a few minutes. I don't know. The technical colleges and the community colleges, if committee, if you remember, we'd set aside $10 million for projects that the different community colleges and technical colleges applied for. If we want to fund all the projects, we would need to add an additional 13.6 million ARPA money. Here again, we're using one-time money for one-time projects, just like we just did with the other four universities. So with that, I'd recognize Senator Glaze.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the addition of $13,694,223 in ARPA funds to the governor's budget item for other community colleges, technical colleges, and Washburn Technical College for FY 2023.
I have a motion, second by Senator Fagg. A question, Senator Hawk.
My recollection was some of those original ones that we looked at, those were cut back, some of them substantially. Is that also the case, and do we have a list of these to look at for the 13.694 million?
I thought that maybe everyone had received one. Did you not receive one?
I don't
Okay.
recall.
Okay.
I might have.
I tell you what, we got 5 minutes before we go on the floor, so why don't I get a copy for everyone so everyone can look at it ahead of our next meeting, and then we'll discuss it further. Yeah, so being we have a motion, we're going to recess until we make an announcement on the floor when we will return, and we'll take up this business. I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of the proposal. With that, we're recessed.
I don't know if you wanted to introduce that, Bill.
Oh, yeah, we'll do that and come back. Yeah.